All right, Lior, welcome to KubeFM. First and foremost, who are you? What do you do? Where do you work?
Hey Bart, yeah, thanks for having me. I work for Google Cloud. I've been leading a lot of the reliability work on GCE, Google Compute Engine, and also Cloud Service Mesh and vendor neutral APIs.
Now, what are three emerging Kubernetes tools that you're keeping an eye on?
So I think the first one, have you heard of Crow, which was recently launched? Yeah, so I actually have high expectations from it. So it basically lets you define a resource called resource graph definition, where behind the scene, like this manages like a lot of Kubernetes resources and also cloud resources as cohesive units. So I think it's definitely can be like a great improvement for the overall enablement for, developer independence, in organization and kind of removing bottlenecks from infrastructure teams. So that's the first one. Um, I also keep an eye on Argo CD, which is very close to my heart. I think back when I worked at Riskified, I think it was back in 2020, where one of the early adopters of Argo. And I think it's great UX, great experience, and I keep an eye on advancements there. Um, and the third one's Gateway API, and we did a gateway for Mesh, and the recent Gateway inference extension. And I'm excited to see all these pieces, kind of coming together to provide, again, vendor neutral APIs experience for Kubernetes users.
To touch on that a little bit further, when we interviewed 30 ambassadors, CNCF ambassadors last year about their least favorite Kubernetes feature, um, network policy management, networking in general was mentioned. What role do you think Gateway API is going to play there?
I do plan to keep an eye on network policies and kind of involved there. I think Gateway API, and probably in conjunction with network policy, there are a lot of smart folks there that kind of exploring the same. I think we want to kind of move towards a more identity focused authorization, network authorization. And I think Gateway API definitely positioned in the center of it, where maybe to own the APIs at the end of the day. Most of the implementations of Gateway API, all the mesh implementation and the north-south implementation are going to be the ones that implement that. Obviously, a lot of CNIs are also welcome, but when we kind of go one layer on top of L3, then it gives us the opportunity to, get some more information from about identity, whether it's from TLS handshake or MTLS certificates. And so I do see Gateway API positioned in the center of it in the future here.
Now, taking a look at a couple of different things that came up in some of our podcast episodes. So Dan Garfield said that using Kubernetes as a central data store allows tools like Argo to detect and sync drift in your infrastructure. In comparison, tools like Terraform externalize their state and are harder to track. Is the market moving to tools like Crossplane to provision infrastructure and away from Terraform?
Yeah, I can't tell if the market's moving or not. I think, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Crossplane is widely adopted yet. But I do think there are distinct use cases for Terraform and Crossplane. So, while I like Crossplane, I think it gives you obviously the operator-driven way to manage infrastructure as code, right? And obviously there is this reconciliation loop that comes, with this pattern that does not exist in Terraform out of the box, which is pretty nice. I think in my mind, Crossplane basically is the missing piece for allowing end-to-end developer independence. Especially when you combine it with, the self-validations on the kind of compositions, resources. And actually like one use case we built when I was working at Riskified, is a use case that we provided a full independence with Helm and Argo CD, for our developers. And, essentially we would develop some kind of basic Helm charts and they would just combine it, use it as umbrella charts and have their application. But the missing piece there was actually, how to define IAM roles, how to define F3 buckets, Kafka topics, all that, which obviously, you can go around, have, your self-service in Slack or web page to do it, and, different kind of automation. But the way I think we could envision it is that, hey, let's have IAM role as a resource. Let's have F3 as a resource. And then it lets us basically have this Helm chart as one cohesive unit where it could be everything that the application need. And I think this is a true game changer for developer independence aware organizations. Now, I do think Terraform is still valid though for a lot of cases. Like it could be, building your VPC, building your subnets, a lot of like kind of foundational configurations, which obviously you'd probably want to combine with some kind of like drift detection tooling. But yes, I think we actually did a very, very good, cool thing with Crossplane to do cluster provisioning. But I guess we could keep it for another day.
Now, if going back to the other subject of service meshes, William Morgan explained that ambient mesh is a viable alternative to having too many sidecar containers in service meshes, but it comes at the expense of not having the pod as a single independent unit. What are your thoughts on service meshes? Should you use one or not? And when should you use one?
I think there's delicate balance between having small enough use cases, right? Having small enough microservices, to understanding that you already have many, and now doing a migration is going to be painful for you, right? I think it kind of also reminds me a little bit, when you ask yourself, how early on should I bring the platform engineer, the DevOps engineer to my organization, or how long should I rely on the infra or the developer? Obviously, there's pros and cons for each. I like service meshes, and I think they provide real value when you start to have this amount of microservices. When you start understanding when you do want to understand what happens to the request that comes into your cluster, what microservices like it pass through. When you start caring about security, what of the connections are MTLS encrypted, what are not. When you want to have identity-based authorization policies and not IP-based, right? Identity-based. And when you start having some advanced L7 routing needs, whether it's canary splitting, whether it's rate limiting, all this kind of stuff that Service Mesh provides out of the box for you. And it's not really out of the box, of course, right? But it just gives you the ability to have all these features without needing to go and change your application code. And I think some of the concerns in the past where you had to go to a service mesh and you'd be vendor locked for the implementation. And I think that's with Gateway API and Gateway for Mesh APIs are going to go away. And I know users really, really value having this portability in their hand. I do think like we're going to see more adoption for sidecarless meshes. And not because sidecarless is better than sidecars. I don't really believe in it. But I think a lot of users didn't even bother to even install service mesh in the first place because of the overhead, because of the cost, right? You had a CV, you had to roll out the whole fleet with sidecars. Now, ambient really came and sidecarless meshes came and broke this problem into two, right? Like you have L4 focused with all those zero trust features, as we call them, that would include MTLS, authorization, and telemetry. And this is basically this is intended to be very, very easy to operate. And I think users could get real value where, when they actually only, opt into this kind of mesh. And then there's the other users who need, all this advanced features, all this L7 features, and they could use, this shared proxy, whether we're talking on the ambient mode. But again, I think there's pros and cons for having this coexisted with your pod and having this, this shared model. But going forward, I think we are going to see more people onboarding the mesh and using vendor-neutral APIs, which are kind of centered in this offering of sidecarless meshes today.
One of the topics that's come up a lot in the last year is, LLMs and AI, making its way into the Kubernetes ecosystem. But it's also felt like we maybe haven't had as many concrete examples as we would like to. One of our guests, Brian, noted that we're starting to see LLMs do configuration generation in Kubernetes. How do you envision AI shaping Kubernetes configuration in the near future?
Well, I lost track of all the AI work streams kind of going on parallel with Kubernetes. There's a lot. DRA is obviously positioned in the center of them, right? Like center of allowing and enabling GPU allocation and device management. And also expanding for networking use cases right now. But there's the gateway inference extension that I mentioned as well, which was just landed, I think, a few weeks ago. And I think this is a really exciting enhancement for those with inference need on Kubernetes, specifically those with lower adapter usage. Just as a very, very, very high level, it's just like increasing throughput by doing smart routing to pods with the correct lower adapters loaded on them. And yeah, I hope to see this extension evolve and having more people bringing more use cases. It's kind of new. I think in my opinion, there's a ton of areas where I could provide real value. Actually, in KubeConsulting, we did a POC that basically provided how provided a way to use AI to basically validate your networking configuration. And also, you talked about network policies, kind of stress test your network policies and understanding drift there, which was really cool, and kind of support kind of a chaos-like driven experiments. And looking forward, what I envision, I think AI ML tools are going to be used for right sizing workloads, right? Maybe we can replace VPA, HPA, all that. There's going to be tools for debugging and troubleshooting on Kube. And I mean, one of the last thing I've been playing with in my head is kind of more advanced anomaly detection. And as an SRE, a lot of the times we kind of ignore 400s, right? Like user errors, and it's not kind of counts toward our SLOs or whatever we want to track. But then imagine you have an AI or like a model that is able to detect anomaly with 400s increase. Maybe it is a problem of the backend developers of ours, not a user's problem. So what kind of that can provide real value towards more reliable products on Kube.
Now, as I said, like last year, Kubernetes turned 10 years old. Looking towards the future, what do you expect in the next 10 years to happen?
I think we are going to see more infrastructure improvements, again, on the center of GPU allocation, resources allocation, all that, kind of make sure Kubernetes continue to be, the driver for all of it. I think inference is an area for focus. A lot of people that I know, like as far as I hear around people that have inference needs, I kind of opting in first for inference in Kubernetes. But I do think training is going to get a whole fresh look as well. I anticipate we're going to see as well more development as form of extension and sub-projects, and less development in Kubernetes core as well. I think it provides a better way to iterate. And yeah, I think multi-cluster as well is something I really want to see growing.
What's next for you?
I am planning to focus on network policies, and authorization. I know there's been a lot of confusion there, not just for, other ambassadors that we're interviewing, but a lot of users. And I do think we could provide a lot of UX improvements on top of that. Obviously, and related mesh and vendor neutral APIs is something I want to see growing. There's already a lot of projects that adopting vendor neutral APIs as, like in Gateway as first class support, like even some projects would Linkerd have, and others, and ambient, Istio ambient have only Gateway API supports, in fact, for some resources, which is great. And I do plan to keep an eye and kind of get more involved in AI networking related topics, AI and reliability on Kube. And I think there's plenty of room for improvement there. So I do plan to be around.
How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Slack is the first go-to. My first name, last name, both. Argo's also lived an email here down. So yeah, that's also a good option.
Last but not least, can you say, hi, my name is Lior, and you're listening to KubeFM.
Hey, my name is Lior, and you're listening to KubeFM.